Whispering Woods, I'd heard the legends about the Whispering Woods, but I didn't believe them. Not until the night I went there alone. The plan was to prove everyone wrong, to show that the whispers were just the wind. Armed with my flashlight and phone, I stepped into the dense forest. The air felt heavy, pressing against my skin like a damp sheet. At first, the silence was comforting, but it didn't last long. A faint voice drifted through the trees. "Leave!" I froze. It wasn't the wind. It was distinct, almost pleading. My flashlight flickered, and in its weak beam, I saw movement. Just a shadow darting between the trees. I called out, "Who's there?" No reply, only a growing chorus of whispers. "Leave, leave, leave." My heart pounded as the whispers became screams. The trees seemed to close in, their gnarled branches stretching toward me. I ran, tripping over roots, falling face first into the dirt. When I looked up, the path was gone. In its place stood a figure, a woman with hollow eyes and a mouth stitched shut. She raised a finger to her lips, and the whispers ceased. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then she leaned closer and whispered in my ear, "You'll never leave." The basement door. It started with the banging. Every night at 3:13 a.m., I'd hear it. 3 sharp knocks on the basement door. I lived alone. The first night, I ignored it, assuming it was my imagination. By the third night, I worked up the nerve to check. I unlocked the basement door and descended the creaking stairs. The air was freezing, and the smell of damp rot was overwhelming. There was nothing there, or so I thought. As I turned to head back up, the door slammed shut, plunging me into darkness. My phone light barely illuminated the space, but then I saw it. Scratches etched into the walls, spelling out my name. A low growl rumbled from the shadows. Something was down there with me, something that whispered, "Stay." The dollhouse. My grandmother left me her dollhouse when she passed away. It was intricate, with tiny furniture and figurines. I thought it was charming until I noticed the changes. One morning, the figurines were in different positions. The woman in the kitchen was now in the bedroom, and the man was staring out a tiny window. I laughed it off, thinking I must have moved them and forgotten. But then I saw them move. Late one night, I caught the figurines in motion, shifting as though alive. They froze the moment they noticed me watching. My heart raced as I realized their tiny faces were turned toward me, expressions twisted into sneers. The next morning, I woke to find a new figure in the dollhouse, a miniature version of me, standing at the window, screaming silently. The phantom passenger driving late at night on empty roads used to calm me, but that night was different. As I drove through a desolate stretch of highway, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Someone was sitting in my back seat. My stomach dropped, and I slammed on the brakes. But when I turned to confront them, the seat was empty. I told myself I was tired, imagining things. A mile down the road, I saw her again, this time in the passenger seat. She was pale, her eyes sunken, her lips whispering words I couldn't hear. I tried to keep driving, but her whisper grew louder until it was a deafening shriek. "Stop!" When I did, the car stalled, and an 18-wheeler sped past, inches from hitting me. I looked back, but she was gone. The lake house. The lake house had been in my family for generations. I thought it would be a peaceful retreat. I was wrong. The first night, I woke to the sound of water dripping. I followed it to the kitchen, where I found wet footprints leading from the lake to the sink. The next night, the sound of soft splashing woke me. Looking out the window, I saw someone standing in the water, staring up at the house. By the third night, they were inside. I woke to find a woman, soaked and shivering, at the foot of my bed. She whispered, "He drowned me," before vanishing. The lake hasn't felt peaceful since. The attic that screams, I had always ignored the attic in our old house. The door was nailed shut, and my parents warned me never to touch it. Last night I heard it, a scream, distant and muffled, coming from above. At first I thought it was the wind, but when it happened again, louder this time, curiosity overtook me. I grabbed a crowbar and pried the door open. The stairs creaked under my weight as I climbed, flashlight trembling in my hand. The air was stale, reeking of mildew and something metallic. "Help me," a voice whispered. I froze. My flashlight swept the room, catching nothing but dust-covered boxes and old furniture. Then something moved. A shadow darted in the corner. I backed away, my foot catching on a loose board. Beneath it was a handprint burned into the wood. I don't go near the attic anymore, but the screaming hasn't stopped. The room that disappears. The room was there yesterday, third door on the right, a small storage room filled with junk. Today it was gone. In its place was a smooth, unbroken wall. I stared at it, confused. My co-workers laughed, saying I was imagining things, but I swear it existed. That night I returned with a flashlight. I traced my fingers along the wall, and that's when I heard it. A muffled banging from the other side. "Let me out!" someone screamed. I ran, and now I can't find the courage to go back. The lake that watches. The lake near my cabin was quiet, untouched by swimmers or boats. Locals called it the Watcher's Lake, but they never explained why. One night I went for a walk along the shore. The water was unnaturally still, reflecting the moon like a mirror. Then I saw it, a face beneath the surface, pale and watching. I stumbled back, but the face rose, followed by a body. A woman draped in seaweed, her eyes locked on mine. Now every time I look at the lake, she's there, closer than before. The knock at midnight. It was always 3 knocks, sharp and deliberate, at exactly midnight. At first I thought it was a prank. I checked the door every time, but no one was ever there. Last night I stayed awake, determined to catch them. At midnight the knocks came again. I swung the door open. No one. But when I turned around, muddy footprints led from the door to my bed. I haven't slept since. The elevator ride to nowhere. It was late when I got into the elevator, the office building empty. I pressed the button for the lobby, but the elevator didn't move. Instead, the light for floor 6 lit up on its own. We only had 5 floors. The elevator groaned as it ascended, the lights flickering. My stomach churned as the air grew colder. When the doors opened, I stepped into a hallway that shouldn't exist. The walls were dark, smeared with handprints. "Help me," came a whisper, but I couldn't tell where it came from. The elevator doors began to close. I ran back, but they slammed shut. The buttons were unresponsive. Then I felt it, a cold hand on my shoulder. The Whispering Park. It was close to midnight when I found myself in Ravenwood Park, a place I hadn't visited since childhood. The swings creaked gently in the breeze, and the moon cast long, crooked shadows across the empty playground. My footsteps were soft against the gravel path, but in the silence of the night, they sounded loud enough to wake the dead. I didn't want to be here. The only reason I came was to clear my mind after a long day. The park had been a happy place once, but now it felt wrong. The air was heavy, the kind of stillness that makes your skin prickle. I tugged my jacket tighter around me and walked faster. Then I heard it, a whisper, faint and just behind me. "Come play." I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Slowly I turned around. Nothing. The path stretched behind me, empty except for the swings. They moved on their own, creaking in rhythm as if someone had just jumped off. I laughed nervously. "It's just the wind," I told myself, but the wind didn't laugh back. I hurried toward the park's exit, keeping my eyes forward. That's when I noticed the playground slide, gleaming silver in the moonlight. A shape at the top caught my attention. A figure crouched in the shadows, its back to me. My heart stopped. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. For a moment I thought it was just my imagination, a trick of the light. But then slowly it turned its head. A face stared back at me, pale, hollow eyes, a mouth twisted into a wide, unnatural grin. My legs locked. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. The figure slid down, without a sound. As it reached the bottom, it vanished into the shadows. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. My chest heaved as I scanned the park, desperate for any sign of movement. The playground was empty. The swings hung still. The slide stood silent. A giggle drifted through the air. I spun around, eyes wild. "Who's there?" I shouted. My voice echoed, fading into the trees. The whisper came again, closer this time. "Come play. Forever." A sharp, icy hand gripped my shoulder. I screamed, tearing away as I bolted for the exit. Gravel crunched beneath my feet as I ran faster than I ever had before. The gate was just ahead. I reached it, gasping, throwing myself against it. The metal was cold, biting into my palms as I pushed. It wouldn't budge. "Stay with us." The voices surrounded me now. Children's laughter, giggles, and whispers all blending together in a haunting chorus. I turned back one last time. They were everywhere, small figures with hollow eyes and toothy grins. The swings, the slide, the monkey bars. They all watched me, and they were getting closer.